It is already too late, said Oberika sadly. Our own men and our sons have joined the rank of the stranger. They have joined his religion, and they help to uphold his government. If we should try to drive out the white men in Umuofia, we should find it easy. There are only 2 of them. But what of our own people who are following their way and have been given power? They would go to Umuru and bring the soldiers, and we would be like Abame. He paused for a long time and then said, I told you on my last visit to Mbanta how they hanged Aneto. What has happened to that piece of land in dispute? Asked Okonkwo. The white man's court has decided that it should belong to Nama's family, who had given much money to the white man's messengers and interpreter. Does the white man understand our custom about land? How can he, when he does not even speak our tongue? But he says that our customs are bad, and our own brothers who have taken up his religion also say that our customs are bad. How do you think we can fight when our own brothers have turned against us? The white man is very clever. He came peaceably and quietly with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart.
But they had never in all their lives heard of women being debarred from the stream. Come along, they said to the women. We will go with you to meet these cowards. Some of them had big sticks, and some even machetes. But Mr. Kiaga restrained them. He wanted first to know why they had been outlawed. They say that Okoli killed the sacred python, said one man. It is false, said another. Okoli told me himself that it was false. Okoli was not there to answer. He had fallen ill on the previous night. Before the day was over, he was dead. His death showed that the gods were still able to fight their own battles. The clan saw no reason then for molesting the Christians. Chapter 19. The last big rains of the year were falling. It was the time for treading red earth with which to build walls. It was not done earlier, because the rains were too heavy and would have washed away the heap of trodden earth. And it could not be done later, because harvesting would soon set in, and after that, the dry season. It was going to be Okonkwo's last harvest in Mbanta. The 7 wasted and weary years were at last dragging to a close. Although he had prospered in his motherland, Okonkwo knew that he would have prospered even more in Umuofia, in the land of his fathers, where men were bold and warlike. In these 7 years, he would have climbed to the utmost heights, and so he regretted every day of his exile. His mother's kinsmen had been very kind to him, and he was grateful, but that did not alter the facts. He had called the first child born to him in exile, Nneka, Mother is Supreme, out of politeness to his mother's kinsmen. But 2 years later, when a son was born, he called him Nwoye, begotten in the wilderness. As soon as he entered his last year in exile, Okonkwo sent money to Oberika to build him 2 huts in his old compound, where he and his family would live until he built more huts and the outside wall of his compound. He could not ask another man to build his own obi for him, nor the walls of his compound. Those things a man built for himself, or inherited from his father. As the last heavy rains of the year began to fall, Obierica sent word that the 2 huts had been built, and Okonkwo began to prepare for his return after the rains. He would have liked to return earlier, build his compound that year before the rain stopped, but in doing so, he would have taken something from the full penalty of 7 years, and that could not be. So he waited, impatiently, for the dry season to come. It came slowly. The rain became lighter and lighter until it fell in slanting showers. Sometimes the sun shone through the rain, and a light breeze blew. It was a gay and airy kind of rain. The rainbow began to appear, and sometimes 2 rainbows, like a mother and her daughter, the one young and beautiful, and the other an old and faint shadow. The rainbow was called the python of the sky. Okonkwo called his 3 wives and told them to get things together for a great feast. "I must thank my mother's kinsmen before I go," he said. Ikemefuna still had some cassava left on her farm from the previous year. Neither of the other wives had. It was not that they had been lazy, but that they had many children to feed. It was therefore understood that Ikemefuna would provide cassava for the feast. Nwoye's mother and Ojiogo would provide the other things like smoked fish, palm oil, and pepper for the soup. Okonkwo would take care of meat and yams. Ikemefuna rose early on the following morning and went to her farm with her daughter, Ezima, and Oji, to harvest cassava tubers. Each of them carried a long cane basket, a machete for cutting down the soft cassava stem, and a little hoe for digging out the tuber. Fortunately, a light rain had fallen during the night, and the soil would not be very hard. "It will not take us long to harvest as much as we like," said Ikemefuna. "But the leaves will be wet," said Ezima. Her basket was balanced on her head, and her arms folded across her breasts. She felt cold. "I dislike cold water dropping on my back. We should have waited for the sun to rise and dry the leaves." Obiageli called her Salt, because she said that she disliked water. "Are you afraid you may dissolve?" The harvesting was easy, as Ikemefuna had said. Ezima shook every tree violently with a long stick before she bent down to cut the stem and dig out the tuber. Sometimes it was not necessary to dig. They just pulled the stump, and earth rose, roots snapped below, and the tuber was pulled out. When they had harvested a sizable heap, they carried it down in 2 trips to the stream, where every woman had a shallow well for fermenting her cassava. "It should be ready in 4 days, or even 3, said Obiageli. "They are young tubers." "They are not all that young," said Ikemefuna. "I planted the farm nearly 2 years ago. It is a poor soil, and that is why the tubers are so small." Okonkwo never did things by halves. When his wife Ikemefuna protested that 2 goats were sufficient for the feast, he told her that it was not her affair. "I am calling a feast because I have the wherewithal. I cannot live on the bank of a river and wash my hands with spittle. My mother's people have been good to me, and I must show my gratitude." And so 3 goats were slaughtered, and a number of fowls. It was like a wedding feast. There was fufu and yam pottage, egusi soup, and bitterleaf soup, and pots of palm wine. All the Umuna were invited to the feast. All the descendants of Okolo, who had lived about 200 years before. The oldest member of this extensive family was Okonkwo's uncle, Uchendu. The kola nut was given him to break, and he prayed to the ancestors. He asked them for health and children. We do not ask for wealth, because he that has health and children will also have wealth. We do not pray to have more money, but to have more kinsmen. We are better than animals, because we have kinsmen. An animal rubs its itching flank against a tree. A man asks his kinsman to scratch him. He prayed especially for Okonkwo and his family. He then broke the kola nut and threw one of the lobes on the ground for the ancestors. As the broken kola nuts were passed round, Okonkwo's wives and children, and those who came to help them with the cooking, began to bring out the food. His sons brought out the pots of palm wine. There was so much food and drink that many kinsmen whistled in surprise. When all was laid out, Okonkwo rose to speak. "I beg you to accept this little kola," he said. "It is not to pay you back for all you did for me in these 7 years. A child cannot pay for its mother's milk. I have only called you together because it is good for kinsmen to meet." Yam pottage was served first, because it was lighter than fufu, and because yam always came first. Then the fufu was served. Some kinsmen ate it with egusi soup, and others with bitterleaf soup. The meat was then shared, so that every member of the umuna had a portion. Every man rose in order of years and took a share. Even the few kinsmen who had not been able to come had their shares taken out for them in due term. As the palm wine was drunk, one of the oldest members of the umuna rose to thank Okonkwo. "If I say that we did not expect such a big feast, I will be suggesting that we did not know how open-handed our son Okonkwo is. We all know him, and we expected a big feast, but it turned out to be even bigger than we expected. Thank you. May all you took out return again. It is good in these days, when the younger generation consider themselves wiser than their sires, to see a man doing things in the grand old way. A man who calls his kinsmen to a feast does not do so to save them from starving. They all have food in their own homes. When we gather together in the moonlit village ground, it is not because of the moon, and can see it in his own compound. We come together because it is good." You may ask why I am saying all this. I say it because I fear for the younger generation, for you people. He waved his arm where most of the young men sat. As for me, I have only a short, and so have and Unochukwu and Ikemefuna. But I fear you, because you do not understand how strong is the bond of kinship. You do not know what it is to speak with one voice. And what is the result? An abominable religion has settled among you. A man can now leave his father and his brothers. He can curse the gods of his fathers and his ancestors like a hunter's dog that suddenly goes mad and turns on his master. I fear for you. I fear for the clan. He turned again to Okonkwo and said, "Thank you for calling us together." Part 3, Chapter 20. 7 years was a long time to be away from one's clan. A man's place was not always there, waiting for him. As soon as he left, someone else rose and filled it. The clan was like a lizard. If it lost its tail, it soon grew another. Okonkwo knew these things. He knew that he had lost his place among the 9 masked spirits who administered justice in the clan. He had lost the chance to lead his warlike clan against the new religion, which, he was told, had gained ground. He had lost the years in which he might have taken the highest titles in the clan. But some of these losses were not irreparable. He was determined that his return should be marked by his people. He would return with a flourish and regain the 7 wasted years. Even in his first year in exile, he had begun to plan for his return. The first thing he would do would be to rebuild his compound on a more magnificent scale. He would build a bigger barn than he had had before, and he would build huts for 2 new wives. Then he would show his wealth by initiating his sons into the Ozo society. Only the really great men in the clan were able to do this. Okonkwo saw clearly the high esteem in which he would be held, and he saw himself taking the highest title in the land. As the years of exile passed, one by one, it seemed to him that his chi might now be making amends for the past disaster. His yams grew abundantly, not only in his motherland, but also in Umuofia, where his friend gave them out year by year to sharecroppers. Then the tragedy of his first son had occurred. At first, it appeared as if it might prove too great for his spirit. But it was a resilient spirit, and in the end, Okonkwo overcame his sorrow. He had 5 other sons, and he would bring them up in the way of the clan. He sent for the 5 sons, and they came and sat in his obi. The youngest of them was 4 years old. "You have all seen the great abomination of your brother. Now he is no longer my son, or your brother. I will only have a son who is a man, who will hold his head up among my people. If any one of you prefers to be a woman, let him follow Nwoye now, while I am alive, so that I can curse him. If you turn against me when I am dead, I will visit you and break your neck." Okonkwo was very lucky in his daughters. He never stopped regretting that Izima was a girl. Of all his children, she alone understood his every mood. A bond of sympathy had grown between them as the years had passed. Izima grew up in her father's exile and became one of the most beautiful girls in Mbanta. She was called Crystal of Beauty, as her mother had been called in her youth. The young, ailing girl who had caused her mother so much heartache had been transformed almost overnight into a healthy, buoyant maiden. She had, it was true, her moments of depression, when she would snap at everybody like a dog. These moods descended on her suddenly, and for no apparent reason, but they were very rare and short-lived. As long as they lasted, she could bear no other person but her father. Many young men and prosperous middle-aged men of Mbanta came to marry her, but she refused them all, because her father had called her one evening and said to her, "There are many good and prosperous people here, but I shall be happy if you marry in Umuofia when we return home." That was all he had said, but Izima had seen clearly all the thought and hidden meaning behind the few words, and she had agreed. "Your half-sister, Obiageli, will not understand me," Okonkwo said, "but you can explain to her." Although they were almost the same age, Izima wielded a strong influence over her half-sister. She explained to her why they should not marry yet, and she agreed also. and so the two of them refused every offer of marriage in Mbanta. I wish she were a boy, Okonkwo thought within himself. She understood things so perfectly. Who else among his children could have read his thoughts so well? With two beautiful grown-up daughters, his return to Umuofia would attract considerable attention. His future sons-in-law would be men of authority in the clan. The poor and unknown would not dare to come forth. Umuofia had indeed changed during the 7 years Okonkwo had been in exile. The church had come and led many astray. Not only the lowborn and the outcast, but sometimes a worthy man had joined it. Such a man was Ogbuefi Ugonna, who had taken 2 titles, and who, like a madman, had cut the anklet of his titles and cast it away to join the Christians. The white missionary was very proud of him, and he was one of the first men in Umuofia to receive the sacrament of Holy Communion, or Holy Feast, as it was called in Igbo. Ogbuefi Ugonna had thought of the feast in terms of eating and drinking, only more holy than the village variety. He had therefore put his drinking horn into his goatskin bag for the occasion. But apart from the church, the white men had also brought a government. They had built a court where the district commissioner judged cases in ignorance. He had court messengers who brought men to him for trial. Many of these messengers came from Umuru, on the bank of the great river where the white men first came many years before, and where they had built the center of their religion and trade and government. These court messengers were greatly hated in Umuofia because they were foreigners and also arrogant and high-handed. They were called Kotma, and because of their ash-colored shorts, they earned the additional name of ashy buttocks. They guarded the prison, which was full of men who had offended against the white man's law. Some of these prisoners had thrown away their twins, and some had molested the Christians. They were beaten in the prison by the Kotma and made to work every morning clearing the government compound and fetching wood for the white commissioner and the court messengers. Some of these prisoners were men of title, who should be above such mean occupation. They were grieved by the indignity and mourned for their neglected farms. As they cut grass in the morning, the younger men sang in time with the strokes of their machetes. Kotma of the ash buttocks, he is fit. The white man has no sense. He is fit to be a slave. The court messengers did not like to be called ashy buttocks, the men, but the song spread in Umuofia. Okonkwo's head was bowed in sadness as Yobierica told him, "Perhaps I have been away too long," Okonkwo said, almost, "but I cannot understand these things you tell me. What is it that's happened to our people? Why have they lost the power to fight?" "Have you not heard Abame?" asked Yobierica. "I've heard," said Okonkwo, "but I have also heard that Abame people were weak and foolish. Why did they not fight back? Had they no guns and machetes? We would be cowards to compare ourselves with them. Their fathers had never dared to stand before ancestors. We must fight these men and drive them from the land." "It is already too late," said Obierica sadly. "Our own men and our sons have joined the ranks of the stranger. They have joined his religion, and they help to uphold his government. If we should try to drive out the white men in Umuofia, we should find it easy. There are only 2 of them. But what of our own people, who are following their way and have been given power. They would go to Umuru and bring the soldiers, and we would be like Abame. He paused for a long time, and then said, I told you on my last visit to Mbanta how they hanged Aneto. What has happened to that piece of land in dispute? Asked Okonkwo. The white man's court has decided that it should belong to Nama's family, who had given much money to the white man's messengers and interpreter. Does the white man understand our custom about land? How can he, when he does not even speak our tongue? But he says that our customs are bad, and our own brothers who have taken up his religion also say that our customs are bad. How do you think we can fight when our own brothers have turned against us? The white man is very clever. He came quietly and peaceably with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. How did they get hold of Aneto to hang him? Asked Okonkwo. When he killed Oduche in the fight over the land, he fled to Aninta to escape the wrath of the earth. This was about 8 days after the fight, because Oduche had not died immediately from his wounds. It was on the 7th day that he died, but everybody knew that he was going to die, and Aneto got his belongings together in readiness to flee. But the Christians had told the white man about the accident, and he sent his Kotma to catch Aneto. He was imprisoned with all the leaders of his family. In the end, Oduche died, and Aneto was taken to Umuru and hanged. The other people were released, but even now, they have not found the mouth with which to tell their suffering. The two men sat in silence for a long while afterwards. Chapter 21. There were many men and women in Umuofia who did not feel as strongly as Okonkwo about the new dispensation. The white man had indeed brought a lunatic religion, but he had also built a trading store, and for the first time, palm oil and kernel became things of great price, and much money flowed into Umuofia. And even in the matter of religion, there was a growing feeling that there might be something in it after all, something vaguely akin to method in the overwhelming madness. This growing feeling was due to Mr. Brown, the white missionary, who was very firm in restraining his flock from provoking the wrath of the clan. One member, in particular, was very difficult to restrain. His name was Enoch, and his father was the priest of the snake cult. The story went around that Enoch had killed and eaten the sacred python, and that his father had cursed him. Mr. Brown preached against such excess of zeal. Everything was possible, he told his energetic flock, but everything was not expedient. And so Mr. Brown came to be respected even by the clan, because he trod softly on its faith. He made friends with some of the great men of the clan, and on one of his frequent visits to the neighboring villages, he had been presented with a carved elephant tusk, which was a sign of dignity and rank. One of the great men in that village was called Akuna, and he had given one of his sons to be taught the white man's knowledge in Mr. Brown's school. Whenever Mr. Brown went to that village, he spent long hours with Akuna in his obi, talking through an interpreter about religion. Neither of them succeeded in converting the other, but they learned more about their different beliefs. You say that there is one supreme God who made heaven and earth, said Akuna on one of Mr. Brown's visits. We also believe in him and call him Chukwu. He made all the world and the other gods. There are no other gods, said Mr. Brown. Chukwu is the only god, and all others are false. You carve a piece of wood, like that one. He pointed at the rafters, from which Akuna's carved ikenga hung. And you call it a god, but it is still a piece of wood. Yes, said Akuna, it is indeed a piece of wood. The tree from which it came was made by Chukwu, as indeed all minor gods were. But he made them for his messengers, so that we could approach him through them. It is like yourself. You are the head of your church. No, protested Mr. Brown. The head of my church is God himself. I know, said Akuna, but there must be a head in this world among men. Somebody like yourself must be the head here. The head of my church in that sense is in England. That is exactly what I am saying. The head of your church is in your country. He has sent you here as his messenger, and you have also appointed your own messengers and servants. Or let me take another example. The district commissioner. He is sent by your king. They have a queen, said the interpreter on his own account. Your queen sends her messenger, the district commissioner. He finds that he cannot do the work alone, and so he appoints Kotma to help him. It is the same with God, or Chukwu. He appoints the smaller gods to help him, because his work is too great for one person. You should not think of him as a person, said Mr. Brown. It is because you do so that you imagine he must need helpers. And the worst thing about it is that you give all the worship to the false gods you have created. That is not so. We make sacrifices to the little gods, but when they fail and there is no one else to turn to, we go to Chukwu. It is right to do so. We approach a great man through his servants. But when his servants fail to help us, then we go to the last source of hope. We appear to pay greater attention to the little gods, but that is not so. We worry them more because we are afraid to worry their master. Our fathers knew that Chukwu was the overlord, and that is why many of them gave their children the name Chukwuka. Chukwu is supreme. You said one interesting thing, said Mr. Brown. You are afraid of Chukwu. In my religion, Chukwu is a loving father and need not be feared by those who do his will. But we must fear him when we are not doing his will, said Akuna. And who is to tell his will? It is too great to be known. In this way, Mr. Brown learned a good deal about the religion of the clan, and he came to the conclusion that a frontal attack on it would not succeed. And so he built a school and a little hospital in Umuofia. He went from family to family, begging people to send their children to his school. But at first they only sent their slaves, or sometimes their lazy children. Mr. Brown begged and argued and prophesied. He said that the leaders of the land in the future would be men and women who had learned to read and write. If Umuofia failed to send her children to the school, strangers would come from other places to rule them. They could already see that happening in the native court, where the DC was surrounded by strangers who spoke his tongue. Most of these strangers came from the distant town of Umuru, on the bank of the great river where the white man first went. In the end, Mr. Brown's arguments began to have an effect. More people came to learn in his school, and he encouraged them with gifts of singlets and towels. They were not all young, these people who came to learn. Some of them were 30 years old or more. They worked on their farms in the morning and went to school in the afternoon. and it was not long before the people began to say that the white man's medicine was quick in working. Mr. Brown's school produced quick results. A few months in it were enough to make one a court messenger, or even a court clerk. Those who stayed longer became teachers, and from Umuofia, laborers went forth into the Lord's vineyard. New churches were established in the surrounding villages, and a few schools with them. From the very beginning, religion and education went hand in hand. Mr. Brown's mission grew from strength to strength, and because of its link with the new administration, it earned a new social prestige. But Mr. Brown himself was breaking down in health. At first he ignored the warning signs, but in the end, he had to leave his flock, sad and broken. It was in the first rainy season after Okonkwo's return to Umuofia that Mr. Brown left for home. As soon as he had learned of Okonkwo's return 5 months earlier, the missionary had immediately paid him a visit. He had just sent Okonkwo's son, Nwoye, who was now called Isaac, to the new training college for teachers in Umuru. And he had hoped that Okonkwo would be happy to hear of it. But Okonkwo had driven him away with the threat that if he came into his compound again, he would be carried out of it. Okonkwo's return to his native land was not as memorable as he had wished. It was true his 2 beautiful daughters aroused great interest among suitors, and marriage negotiations were soon in progress. But beyond that, Umuofia did not appear to have taken any special notice of the warrior's return. The clan had undergone such profound change during his exile that it was barely recognizable. The new religion and government and the trading stores were very much in the people's eyes and minds. There were still many who saw these new institutions as evil, but even they talked and thought about little else, and certainly not about Okonkwo's return. And it was the wrong year, too. If Okonkwo had immediately initiated his 2 sons into the Ozo society, as he had planned, he would have caused a stir. But the initiation rite was performed once in 3 years in Umuofia, and he had to wait for nearly 2 years for the next round of ceremonies. Okonkwo was deeply grieved. And it was not just a personal grief. He mourned for the clan, which he saw breaking up and falling apart, and he mourned for the warlike men of Umuofia, who had so unaccountably become soft, like women. Chapter 22. Mr. Brown's successor was the Reverend James Smith, and he was a different kind of man. He condemned openly Mr. Brown's policy of compromise and accommodation. He saw things as black and white, and black was evil. He saw the world as a battlefield in which the children of light were locked in mortal conflict with the sons of darkness. He spoke in his sermons about sheep and goats, and about wheat and tares. He believed in slaying the prophets of Baal. Mr. Smith was greatly distressed by the ignorance which many of his flock showed even in such things as the Trinity and the sacraments. It only showed that they were seeds sown on a rocky soil. Mr. Brown had thought of nothing but numbers. He should have known that the kingdom of God did not depend on large crowds. Our Lord himself stressed the importance of fewness. Narrow is the way, and few the number. To fill the Lord's holy temple with an idolatrous crowd clamoring for signs was a folly of everlasting consequence. Our Lord used the whip only once in his life to drive the crowd away from his church. Within a few weeks of his arrival in Umuofia, Mr. Smith suspended a young woman from the church for pouring new wine into old bottles. This woman had allowed her heathen husband to mutilate her dead child. The child had been declared an ogbanje, plaguing its mother by dying and entering her womb to be born again. 4 times this child had run its evil round, and so it was mutilated to discourage it from returning. Mr. Smith was filled with wrath when he heard of this. He disbelieved the story which even some of the most faithful confirmed, the story of really evil children who were not deterred by mutilation, but came back with all the scars. He replied that such stories were spread in the world by the devil to lead men astray. Those who believed such stories were unworthy of the Lord's table. There was a saying in Umuofia that as a man danced, so the drums were beaten for him. Mr. Smith danced a furious step, and so the drums went bad. The overzealous converts who had smarted under Mr. Brown's restraining hand now flourished in full favor. One of them was Enoch, the son of the snake priest, who was believed to have killed and eaten the sacred python. Enoch's devotion to the new faith had seemed so much greater than Mr. Brown's that the villagers called him the outsider who wept louder than the bereaved. Enoch was short and slight of build, and always seemed in great haste. His feet were short and broad, and when he stood or walked, his heels came together, and his feet opened outwards, as if they had quarreled and meant to go in different directions. Such was the excessive energy bottled up in Enoch's small body, that it was always erupting in quarrels and fights. On Sundays, he always imagined that the sermon was preached for the benefit of his enemies, and if he happened to sit near one of them, he would occasionally turn to give him a meaningful look, as if to say, "I told you so." It was Enoch who touched off the great conflict between church and clan in Umuofia, which had been gathering since Mr. Brown left. It happened during the annual ceremony, which was held in honor of the earth deity. At such times, the ancestors of the clan who had been committed to Mother Earth at their death emerged again as a gugu through tiny ant holes. One of the greatest crimes a man could commit was to unmask an egugu in public, or to say or do anything which might reduce its immortal prestige in the eyes of the uninitiated. And this was what Enoch did. The annual worship of the earth goddess fell on a Sunday, and the masked spirits were abroad. The Christian women who had been to church could not therefore go home. Some of their men had gone out to beg the egugu to retire for a short while for the women to pass. They agreed, and were already retiring, when Enoch boasted aloud that they would not dare to touch a Christian. Whereupon they all came back, and one of them gave Enoch a good stroke of the cane, which was always carried. Enoch fell on him, and tore off his mask. The other egugu immediately surrounded their desecrated companion, to shield from the profane gaze of women and children, and led him away. Enoch had killed an ancestral spirit, and Umuofia was thrown into confusion. That night, the mother of the spirits walked the length and breadth of the clan, weeping for her murdered son. It was a terrible night. Not even the oldest man in Umuofia had ever heard such a strange and fearful sound, and it was never to be heard again. It seemed as if the very soul of the tribe wept for a great evil that was coming, its own death. On the next day, all the masked egugu of Umuofia assembled in the marketplace. They came from all the quarters of the clan, and even from the neighboring villages. The dreaded Otakagu came from Imo. and Ekwensu, dangling a white cock, arrived from Uli. It was a terrible gathering. The eerie voices of countless spirits, the bells that clattered behind some of them, and the clash of machetes as they ran forwards and backwards and saluted one another, sent tremors of fear into every heart. For the first time in living memory, the sacred bull roarer was heard in broad daylight. From the marketplace, the furious band made for Enoch's compound. Some of the elders of the clan went with them, wearing heavy protections of charms and amulets. These were men whose arms were strong in ogu, or medicine. As for the ordinary men and women, they listened from the safety of their huts. The leaders of the Christians had met together at Mr. Smith's parsonage on the previous night. As they deliberated, they could hear the mother of spirits wailing for her son. The chilling sound affected Mr. Smith, and for the first time, he seemed to be afraid. "What are they planning to do?" he asked. No one knew, because such a thing had never happened before. Mr. Smith would have sent for the district commissioner and his court messengers, but they had gone on tour on the previous day. "One thing is clear," said Mr. Smith. "We cannot offer physical resistance to them. Our strength lies in the Lord." They knelt down together and prayed to God for delivery. "O Lord, save thy people," cried Mr. Smith. "And bless thine inheritance," replied the men. They decided that Enoch should be hidden in the parsonage for a day or two. Enoch himself was greatly disappointed when he heard this, for he had hoped that a holy war was imminent, and there were a few other Christians who thought like him. But wisdom prevailed in the camp of the faithful, and many lives were thus saved. The band of Igugu moved like a furious whirlwind to Enoch's compound, and with machete and fire reduced it to a desolate heap. And from there, they made for the church, intoxicated with destruction. Mr. Smith was in his church when he heard the masked spirits coming. He walked quietly to the door which commanded the approach to the church compound, and stood there. But when the first 3 or 4 Igugu appeared on the church compound, he nearly bolted. He overcame this impulse, and instead of running away, he went down the 2 steps that led up to the church, and walked towards the approaching spirits. They surged forward, and a long stretch of the bamboo fence with which the church compound was surrounded gave way before them. Discordant bells clanged, machetes clashed, and the air was full of dust and weird sounds. Mr. Smith heard a sound of footsteps behind him. He turned round and saw Okeke, his interpreter. Okeke had not been on the best of terms with his master since he had strongly condemned Enoch's behavior at the meeting of the leaders of the church during the night. Okeke had gone as far as to say that Enoch should not be hidden in the parsonage, because he would only draw the wrath of the clan on the pastor. Mr. Smith had rebuked him in very strong language, and had not sought his advice that morning. But now, as he came up and stood by him, confronting the angry spirits, Mr. Smith looked at him and smiled. It was a wan smile, but there was deep gratitude there. For a brief moment, the onrush of the Igugu was checked by the unexpected composure of the 2 men. But it was only a momentary check, like the tense silence between blasts of thunder. The second onrush was greater than the first. It swallowed up the 2 men. Then an unmistakable voice rose above the tumult, and there was immediate silence. Space was made around the 2 men, and Umuofia began to speak. Umuofia was the leading Egugu of Umuofia. He was the head and spokesman of the 9 ancestors who administered justice in the clan. His voice was unmistakable, and so he was able to bring immediate peace to the agitated spirits. He then addressed Mr. Smith, and as he spoke, clouds of smoke rose from his head. "The body of the white man, I salute you," he said, using the language in which immortals spoke to men. "The body of the white man, do you know me?" he asked. Mr. Smith looked at his interpreter, but Okeke, who was a native of distant Umuru, was also at a loss. Umuofia laughed in his guttural voice. It was like the laugh of rusty metal. "They are strangers," he said, "and they are ignorant, but let that pass." He turned round to his comrades and saluted them, calling them the fathers of Umuofia. He dug his rattling spear into the ground, and it shook with metallic life. Then he turned once more to the missionary and his interpreter. "Tell the white man that we will not do him any harm," he said to the interpreter. "Tell him to go back to his house and leave us alone. We liked his brother, who was with us before. He was foolish, but we liked him, and for his sake we shall not harm his brother. But this shrine which he built must be destroyed. We shall no longer allow it in our midst. It has bred untold abominations, and we have come to put an end to it." He turned to his comrades. "Fathers of Umuofia, I salute you." And they replied with one guttural voice. He turned again to the missionary. "You can stay with us if you like our ways. You can worship your own God. It is good that a man should worship the gods and the spirits of his fathers. Go back to your house so that you may not be hurt. Our anger is great, but we have held it down so that we can talk to you." Mr. Smith said to his interpreter, "Tell them to go away from here. This is the house of God, and I will not live to see it desecrated." Okeke interpreted wisely to the spirits and leaders of Umuofia. "The white man says he is happy you have come to him with your grievances like friends. He will be happy if you leave the matter in his hands." "We cannot leave the matter in his hands because he does not understand our customs, just as we do not understand his. We say he is foolish because he does not know our ways, and perhaps he says we are foolish because we do not know his. Let him go away." Mr. Smith stood his ground, but he could not save his church. When the Egugu went away, the red earth church, which Mr. Brown had built, was a pile of earth and ashes. And for the moment, the spirit of the clan was pacified. Chapter 23. For the first time in many years, Okonkwo had a feeling that was akin to happiness. The times which had altered so unaccountably during his exile seemed to be coming round again. The clan which had turned false on him appeared to be making amends. He had spoken violently to his clansmen when they had met in the marketplace to decide on their action, and they had listened to him with respect. It was like the good old days again, when a warrior was a warrior. Although they had not agreed to kill the missionary or drive away the Christians, they had agreed to do something substantial, and they had done it. Okonkwo was almost happy again. For 2 days after the destruction of the church, nothing happened. Every man in Umuofia went about armed with a gun or a machete. They would not be caught unawares, like the men of Abame. Then the district commissioner returned from his tour. Mr. Smith went immediately to him, and they had a long discussion. The men of Umuofia did not take any notice of this, and if they did, they thought it was not important. The missionary often went to see his brother white man. There was nothing strange in that. 3 days later, the district commissioner sent his sweet-tongued messenger to the leaders of Umuofia, asking them to meet him in his headquarters. That also was not strange. He often asked them to hold such palavers, as he called them. Okonkwo was among the 6 leaders he invited. Okonkwo warned the others to be fully armed. An Umuofia man does not refuse a call, he said. He may refuse to do what he is asked. He does not refuse to be asked. But the times have changed, and we must be fully prepared. And so the 6th commissioner, armed with their machetes. They did not carry guns, for that would be unseemly. They were led into the courthouse, where the district commissioner sat. He received them politely. They unslung their goatskin bags and their sheathed machetes, put them on the floor, and sat down. I have asked you to come, began the commissioner, because of what happened during my absence. I have been told a few things, but I cannot believe them until I have heard your own side. Let us talk about it like friends and find a way of ensuring that it does not happen again. Ogbuefi Ekwueme rose to his feet and began to tell the story. Wait a minute, said the commissioner. I want to bring in my men so that they too can hear your grievances and take warning. Many of them come from distant places, and although they speak your tongue, they are ignorant of your customs. James, go and bring in the men. His interpreter left the courtroom and soon returned with 12 men. They sat together with the men of Umuofia, and Ogbuefi Ekwueme began to tell the story of how Enoch murdered an Egugu. It happened so quickly that the 6 men did not see it coming. There was only a brief scuffle, too brief even to allow the drawing of a sheathed machete. The 6 men were handcuffed and led into the guardroom. We shall not do you any harm, said the district commissioner to them later, if only you agree to cooperate with us. We have brought a peaceful administration to you and your people, so that you may be happy. If any man ill-treats you, we shall come to your rescue. But we will not allow you to ill-treat others. We have a court of law, where we judge cases and administer justice, just as it is done in my own country under a great queen. I brought you here because you joined together to molest others, to burn people's houses and their place of worship. That must not happen in the dominion of our queen, the most powerful ruler in the world. I have decided that you will pay a fine of 200 bags of cowries. You will be released as soon as you agree to this and undertake to collect that fine from your people. What do you say to that? The 6 men remained sullen and silent, and the commissioner left them for a while. He told the court messengers when he left the guardroom to treat the men with respect, because they were the leaders of Umuofia. They said, "Yes, sir," and saluted. As soon as the district commissioner left, the head messenger, who was also the prisoner's barber, took down his razor and shaved off all the hair on the men's heads. They were still handcuffed, and they just sat and moped. "Who is the chief among you?" the court messengers asked in jest. "We see that every pauper wears the anklet of title in Umuofia. Does it cost as much as 10 cowries? The 6 men ate nothing throughout that day and the next. They were not even given any water to drink, and they could not go out to urinate or go into the bush when they were pressed. At night, the messengers came in to taunt them and to knock their shaven heads together. Even when the men were left alone, they found no words to speak to one another. It was only on the third day, when they could no longer bear the hunger and the insults, that they began to talk about giving in. "We should have killed the white man if you had listened to me," Okonkwo snarled. "We could have been in Umuru now, waiting to be hanged," someone said to him. "Who wants to kill the white man?" asked a messenger who had just rushed in. Nobody spoke. "You are not satisfied with your crime, but you must kill the white man on top of it." He carried a strong stick, and he hit each man a few blows on the head and back. Okonkwo was choked with hate. As soon as the 6 men were locked up, court messengers went into Umuofia to tell the people that their leaders would not be released until they paid a fine of 250 bags of cowries. "Unless you pay the fine immediately," said their headman, "we will take your leaders to Umuru before the big white man and hang them." This story spread quickly through the villages and was added to as it went. Some said that the men had already been taken to Umuru and would be hanged on the following day. Some said that their families would also be hanged. Others said that soldiers were already on their way to shoot the people of Umuofia, as they had done in Abame. It was the time of the full moon, but that night the voice of children was not heard. The village Ilo, where they always gathered for a moon play, was empty. The women of Igwedo did not meet in their secret enclosure to learn a new dance to be displayed later to the village. Young men who were always abroad in the moonlight kept their huts that night. Their manly voices were not heard on the village paths as they went to visit their friends and lovers. Umuofia was like a startled animal, with ears erect, sniffing the silent, ominous air, and not knowing which way to run. The silence was broken by the village crier beating his sonorous ogene. He called every man in Umuofia, from the Akakanma age group upwards, to a meeting in the marketplace after the morning meal. He went from one end of the village to the other, and walked all its breadth. He did not leave out any of the main footpaths. Okonkwo's compound was like a deserted homestead. It was as if cold water had been poured on it. His family was all there, but everyone spoke in whispers. His daughter, Ezinma, had broken her 28-day visit to the family of her future husband, and returned home when she heard that her father had been imprisoned and was going to be hanged. As soon as she got home, she went to Obierika to ask what the men of Umuofia were going to do about it. But Obierika had not been home since morning. His wives thought he had gone to a secret meeting. Ezinma was satisfied that something was being done. On the morning after the village crier's appeal, the men of Umuofia met in the marketplace and decided to collect without delay 250 bags of cowries to appease the white man. They did not know that 50 bags would go to the court messengers, who had increased the fine for that purpose. Chapter 24. Okonkwo and his fellow prisoners were set free as soon as the fine was paid. The district commissioner spoke to them again about the great queen and about peace and good government, but the men did not listen. They just sat and looked at him and at his interpreter. In the end, they were given back their bags and sheathed machetes and told to go home. They rose and left the courthouse. They neither spoke to anyone nor among themselves. The courthouse, like the church, was built a little way outside the village. The footpath that linked them was a very busy one, because it also led to the stream beyond the court. It was open and sandy. Footpaths were open and sandy in the dry season, but when the rains came, the bush grew thick on either side and closed in on the path. It was now dry season. As they made their way to the village, the 6 men met women and children going to the stream with their water pots. But the men wore such heavy and fearsome looks that the women and children did not say no or welcome to them, but edged out of the way to let them pass. In the village, little groups of men joined them until they became a sizable company. They walked silently. As each of the 6 men got to his compound, he turned in, taking some of the crowd with him. The village was astir in a silent, suppressed way. Zima had prepared some food for her father as soon as news spread that the 6 men would be released. She took it to him in his obi. He ate absent-mindedly. He had no appetite. He only ate to please her. His male relations and friends had gathered in his obi, and Obierika was urging him to eat. Nobody else spoke, but they noticed the long stripes on Okonkwo's back, where the warder's whip had cut into his flesh. The village crier was abroad again in the night. He beat his iron gong and announced that another meeting would be held in the morning. Everyone knew that Umuofia was at last going to speak its mind about the things that were happening. Okonkwo slept very little that night. The bitterness in his heart was now mixed with a kind of childlike excitement. Before he had gone to bed, he had brought down his war dress, which he had not touched since his return from exile. He had shaken out his smoked raffia skirt and examined his tall feather headgear and his shield. They were all satisfactory, he had thought. As he lay on his bamboo bed, he thought about the treatment he had received in the white man's court, and he swore vengeance. If Umuofia decided on war, all would be well. But if they chose to be cowards, he would go out and avenge himself. He thought about wars in the past. The noblest, he thought, was the war against Isike. In those days, Okudo was still alive. Okudo sang a war song in a way that no other man could. He was not a fighter, but his voice turned every man into a lion. Worthy men are no more, Okonkwo sighed as he remembered those days. Isike will never forget how we slaughtered them in that war. We killed 12 of their men, and they killed only 2 of ours. Before the end of the 4th market week, they were suing for peace. Those were days when men were men. As he thought of these things, he heard the sound of the iron gong in the distance. He listened carefully, and could just hear the crier's voice, but it was very faint. He turned on his bed, and his back hurt him. He ground his teeth. The crier was drawing nearer and nearer, until he passed by Okonkwo's compound. The greatest obstacle in Umuofia, Okonkwo thought bitterly, is that coward, Nwoye. His sweet tongue can change fire into cold ash. When he speaks, he moves our men to impotence. If they had ignored his womanish wisdom 5 years ago, we would not have come to this. He ground his teeth. Tomorrow he will tell them that our fathers never fought a war of blame. If they listen to him, I shall leave them, and plan my own revenge. The crier's voice had once more become faint, and the distance had taken a harsh edge off his iron gong. Okonkwo turned from one side to the other, and derived a kind of pleasure from the pain his back gave him. Let Nwoye talk about a war of blame tomorrow, and I shall show him my back and head. He ground his teeth. The marketplace began to fill as soon as the sun rose. Obierica was waiting in his obi when Okonkwo came along and called him. He hung his goatskin bag and his sheathed machete on his shoulder and went out to join him. Obierica's hut was close to the road, and he saw every man who passed to the marketplace. He had exchanged greetings with many who had already passed that morning. When Okonkwo and Obierica got to the meeting place, there were already so many people that if one threw up a grain of sand, it would not find its way to the earth again. And many more people were coming from every quarter of the 9 villages. It warmed Okonkwo's heart to see such strength of numbers. But he was looking for one man in particular, the man whose tongue he dreaded and despised so much. "Can you see him?" he asked Obiera. "Who?" "Nwoye," he said, his eyes roving from one corner of the huge marketplace to the other. Most of the men sat on wooden stools they had brought with them. "No," said Obierica, casting his eyes over the crowd. "Yes, there he is, under the silk cotton tree. Are you afraid he would convince us not to fight?" "Afraid? I do not care what he does to you. I despise him and those who listen to him. I shall fight alone if I choose." They spoke at the top of their voices because everybody was talking, and it was like the sound of a great market. "I shall wait till he has spoken," Okonkwo thought. "Then I shall speak." "But how do you know he will speak against war?" Obierica asked after a while. "Because I know he is a coward," said Okonkwo. Obierica did not hear the rest of what he said, because at that moment somebody touched his shoulder from behind, and he turned round to shake hands and exchange greetings with 5 or 6 friends. Okonkwo did not turn round, even though he knew the voices. He was in no mood to exchange greetings, but one of the men touched him and asked about the people of his compound. "They are well," he replied without interest. The first man to speak to Umuofia that morning was Okika, one of the 6 men who had been imprisoned. Okika was a great man and an orator, but he did not have the booming voice which a first speaker must use to establish silence in the assembly of the clan. Onyeka had such a voice, and so he was asked to salute Umuofia before Okika began to speak. "Umuofia! Kwenu!" he bellowed, raising his left arm and pushing the air with his open hand. "Yah!" roared Umuofia. "Umuofia! Kwenu!" he bellowed again and again and again, facing a new direction each time, and the crowd answered, "Yah!" There was immediate silence, as though cold water had been poured on a roaring flame. Okika sprang to his feet, and also saluted his clansmen 4 times. Then he began to speak. "You all know why we are here, when we ought to be building our barns or mending our huts, when we should be putting our compounds in order. My father used to say to me, 'Whenever you see a toad jumping in broad daylight, then know that something is after its life.' When I saw you all pouring into this meeting from all the quarters of our clan so early this morning, I knew that something was after our life. He paused for a brief moment and then began again. All our gods are weeping. Idemili is weeping. Ogugu is weeping. Agbala is weeping, and all the others. Our dead fathers are weeping because of the shameful sacrilege they are suffering, and the abomination we have all seen with our eyes. He stopped again to steady his trembling voice. This is a great gathering. No clan can boast of greater numbers or greater valor. But are we all here? I ask you, are all the sons of Umuofia with us here? A deep murmur swept through the crowd. They are not, he said. They have broken the clan and gone their several ways. We who are here this morning have remained true to our fathers, but our brothers have deserted us and joined a stranger to soil their fatherland. If we fight the stranger, we shall hit our brothers and perhaps shed the blood of a clansman. But we must do it. Our fathers never dreamed of such a thing. They never killed their brothers. But a white man never came to them. So we must do what our fathers would never have done. ANACHY, the bird, was asked why he was always on the wing, and he replied, "Men have learned to shoot without missing their mark, and I have learned to fly without perching on a twig." We must root out this evil. And if our brothers take the side of evil, we must root them out too. And we must do it now. We must bail this water now that it is only ankle deep. At this point, there was a sudden stir in the crowd, and every eye was turned in one direction. There was a sharp bend in the road that led from the marketplace to the white man's court and to the stream beyond it. And so no one had seen the approach of the 5 court messengers until they had come round the bend, a few paces from the edge of the crowd. Okonkwo was sitting at the edge. He sprang to his feet as soon as he saw who it was. He confronted the head messenger, trembling with hate, unable to utter a word. The man was fearless and stood his ground, his 4 men lined up behind him. In that brief moment, the world seemed to stand still, waiting. There was utter silence. The men of Umuofia were merged into the mute backcloth of trees and giant creepers, waiting. The spell was broken by the head messenger. "Let me pass," he ordered. "What do you want here?" "The white man, whose power you know too well, has ordered this meeting to stop." In a flash, Okonkwo drew his machete. The messenger crouched to avoid the blow. It was useless. Okonkwo's machete descended twice, and the man's head lay beside his uniformed body. The waiting backcloth jumped into tumultuous life, and the meeting was stopped. Okonkwo stood looking at the dead man. He knew that Umuofia would not go to war. He knew because they had let the other messengers escape. They had broken into tumult instead of action. He discerned fright in that tumult. He heard voices asking, "Why did he do it?" He wiped his machete on the sand and went away. Chapter 25. When District Commissioner arrived at Okonkwo's compound, at the head of an armed band of soldiers and court messengers, a crowd of men sitting wearily in the obi. He commanded them to come aside, and they obeyed without a murmur. "Which among you is called Okonkwo?" he asked through his interpreter. "He is not here," replied Obierika. "Where is he?" "He is not here." The commissioner became angry and red in the face. He warned the men that unless they produced Okonkwo forthwith, he would lock them all up. The men murmured among themselves, and Obierika spoke again. "We can take you where he is, and perhaps your men will help us." The commissioner did not understand what Obierika meant when he said, "Perhaps your men will help us." One of the most infuriating habits of these people was their love of superfluous words, he thought. Obierika, with 5 or 6 others, led the way. The commissioner and his men followed, their firearms held at the ready. He had warned Obierika that if he and his men played any monkey tricks, they would be shot. And so they went. There was a small bush behind Okonkwo's compound. The only opening into this bush from the compound was a little round hole in the red earth wall, through which fowls went in and out in their endless search for food. The hole would not let a man through. It was to this bush that Obierika led the commissioner and his men. They skirted round the compound, keeping close to the wall. The only sound they made was with their feet as they crushed dry leaves. Then they came to the tree from which Okonkwo's body was dangling, and they stopped dead. "Perhaps your men can help us bring him down and bury him," said Obierika. "We have sent for strangers from another village to do it for us, but they may be a long time coming." The district commissioner changed instantaneously. The resolute administrator in him gave way to the student of primitive customs. "Why can't you take him down yourselves?" he asked. "It is against our custom," said one of the men. "It is an abomination for a man to take his own life. It is an offense against the earth, and a man who commits it will not be buried by his clansmen. His body is evil, and only strangers may touch it. That is why we ask your people to bring him down, because you are strangers." "Will you bury him like any other man?" asked the commissioner. "We cannot bury him. Only strangers can. We shall pay your men to do it. When he has been buried, we will then do our duty by him. We shall make sacrifices to cleanse the desecrated land." Obierika, who had been gazing steadily at his friend's dangling body, turned suddenly to the district commissioner and said ferociously, "That man was one of the greatest men in Umuofia. You drove him to kill himself, and now he will be buried like a dog." He could not say any more. His voice trembled and choked his words. "Shut up!" shouted one of the messengers, quite unnecessarily. "Take down the body," the commissioner ordered his chief messenger, "and bring it and all these people to the court." "Yes, sir," the messenger said, saluting. The commissioner went away, taking 3 or 4 of the soldiers with him. In the many years in which he had toiled to bring civilization to different parts of Africa, he had learned a number of things. One of them was that a district commissioner must never attend to such undignified details as cutting a hanged man from the tree. Such attention would give the natives a poor opinion of him. In the book, which he planned to write, he would stress that point. As he walked back to the court, he thought about that book. Every day brought him some new material. The story of this man who had killed a messenger and hanged himself would make interesting reading. One could almost write a whole chapter on him. Perhaps not a whole chapter, but a reasonable paragraph at any rate. There was so much else to include, and one must be firm in cutting out details. He had already chosen the title of the book, after much thought. The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger.
The end. You've been listening to Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, narrated by Peter Francis James. Thank you for being a Recorded Books reader. Audible have enjoyed this program.
Religion, and they help to uphold his government. If we should try to drive out the white men in Umuofia, we should find it easy. There are only 2 of them. But what of our own people who are following their way and have been given power? They would go to Umuru and bring the soldiers, and we would be like Abame. He paused for a long time and then said, I told you on my last visit to Mbanta how they hanged Aneto. What has happened to that piece of land in dispute? Asked Okonkwo. The white man's court has decided that it should belong to Nama's family, who had given much money to the white man's messengers and interpreter. Does the white man understand our custom about land? How can he, when he does not even speak our tongue? But he says that our customs are bad, and our own brothers who have taken up his religion also say that our customs are bad. How do you think we can fight when our own brothers have turned against us? The white man is very clever. He came peaceably and quietly with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. It is already too late, said Oberika sadly. Our own men and our sons have joined the ranks of the stranger. They have joined his religion, and they help to uphold his government. If we should try to drive out the white men in Umuofia, we should find it easy. There are only 2 of them. But what of our own people who are following their way and have been given power? They would go to Umuru and bring the soldiers, and we would be like Abame. He paused for a long time and then said, I told you on my last visit to Mbanta how they hanged Aneto. What has happened to that piece of land in dispute? Asked Okonkwo. The white man's court has decided that it should belong to Nama's family, who had given much money to the white man's messengers and interpreter. Does the white man understand our custom about land? How can he, when he does not even speak our tongue? But he says that our customs are bad, and our own brothers who have taken up his religion also say that our customs are bad. How do you think we can fight when our own brothers have turned against us? The white man is very clever. He came peaceably and quietly with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart.